All right. Hi. First of all, who are you?
Hi, my name is Dean McDaniel Keith. If that name sounds familiar, it's because your Teacher Kate. She's my older sister.
Okay. And where do you live?
I live in New Taipei City, Taiwan, just
Okay.
outside of the capital of Taipei.
And what continent is that part of?
Taiwan is a small island, not that small. It's about a third the size of California, right off the coast of China.
Okay.
So it's in Asia.
Got it. What happened for people in Taiwan when the coronavirus started spreading in early 2020?
I would say the first time I heard about the coronavirus here in Taiwan was in January, and I actually heard about it at the airport as I was getting ready to get on a plane to head back to San Francisco. And that would have been June 17th, I think, of 2020.
June or
And
January?
January, sorry. J months, they're not actually all the same. Remember that, guys. So at that point, I was aware of it, and they were checking temperatures at the airport. When I went back to the U.S. at that time, actually, San Francisco had some sort of checking that they were doing for flights out of Wuhan as well, and then that sort of disappeared by the time I flew back at the end of January to Taiwan. And at that point, Taiwan was screening everybody at the airport, but it still wasn't that intense. And then by early
What do you mean by
February,
screening people at the airport? What were they doing?
screening people at the airport is they were asking you to self-report any symptoms, and they were checking everybody's temperature when they come in.
Okay.
I may be incorrect here, but I'm pretty sure they've actually done sort of temperature checks for a long time, possibly since the SARS outbreak in 2003. But I'm not totally sure. It's a little section you go through on your way to customs.
Okay. So you get back to Taiwan in February, is that right? February 2020?
Uh, the I think I left on January 31st, so I would have got here, I think, February 2nd.
Okay. And what about after you left the airport? What was life like outside in Taipei?
At that point, it was still fairly normal. More people were wearing masks than usual, and pretty quickly it became very difficult to get masks. Now, Taiwan, after the SARS, which was a similar virus outbreak in 2003, much deadlier but didn't spread as quickly. I mean, it had more lethal per person to get it. You were much more likely to die. But after that, lots of people just sort of had a habit of wearing masks whenever they're sick. It's just considered common politeness. So if you're at work, if you're at school, even if you're a little kid, it's pretty normal if you have a cold to just wear a mask, and
Mm-hmm.
especially on public transit. So really, the only problem at that point was buying masks.
Okay. Cool. And what is life like for people in Taiwan now? Like related to COVID. So how many people are getting COVID-19 every day? What safety measures are people taking? How do people feel about COVID-19 in Taiwan now in
So I mean,
2021?
Taiwan started its response to the coronavirus actually in December of 2019. They sort of called together the Central Epidemic Command Center, and it slowly ramped up. And eventually, masks were sort of a thing you signed up with your insurance card. Everybody has an insurance card from the government here. You use your insurance card to purchase masks. And at first, you get, I think, it was 3 masks for every week or something, and you could only go on certain days. But again, masks are normal here. Usually, you could get masks at most stores, and it was not difficult. Whereas in America, masks are not available almost everywhere. Um, but right now our life is mostly unaffected. Like the difference is if you go into a store or if you go on public transportation, a bus or the subway, then you're expected to wear a mask and you'll get a very large fine if you're not doing it. But overall, people are happy to wear masks. I teach preschool. My preschool students, they're 3, tend to wear masks. There's 1 or 2 that are a little bit not so great about it, but generally they kind of enjoy it and they get to stylize their own masks, so they have fun with it.
Okay. And how many people are getting COVID-19 in Taiwan
Oh,
each day?
right. So less than 1, and so right now there was a little bit of community spread that actually spread out of a hospital, which had isolation ward got passed to a doctor who's even fully suited up. Sometimes coronavirus can just get by. Then he passed it on to his girlfriend, and then from there it kind of spread briefly. But that was contained in the past month. So we had some local cases, maybe a grand total of like 25 local cases that came from that hospital then. But otherwise, it's, most days it's 0. Other days it can be between 1 and 5. But those are all people coming from abroad, coming into Taiwan. Anyone who wants to fly into Taiwan, one, it's more difficult to get a visa than usual, but also if you come in, you need to quarantine for 14 days in a separate room away from anybody else. And then after that, you have 7 more days of sort of self-help not self-help, self-health monitoring.
Okay.
And during that self-health monitoring, that's very difficult to say. Self-health monitoring, wow, guys, make your own tongue twister. You can't take public transportation or go into like any crowded places.
Okay.
I don't know how well that is actually enforced, but certainly the quarantine is now you have to be at official quarantine hotels, and there's an app on your phone that tracks you.
Okay. Cool. What do you think that people in Taiwan did well or are doing well or doing badly to stop the spread of coronavirus? Just individual people, what are they doing well or badly?
I think the government was very clear about what they wanted at the very beginning, and then also people were used to wearing masks, so that didn't take a lot to get people into it. In SARS, which I mentioned in 2003, there was a bunch of deaths at a central hospital in Taipei, and they actually had to close down the whole hospital. So even people who were very far away from that still have a very distinct memory in their mind at that time. So I think it didn't take a lot of pushing to get people to follow directions, which involves staying home. We never had an actual stay-at-home order, but that's because we were able to contain the spread. And every time there was a local case, they catch it quickly by following these contact tracing protocols.
Okay. And what that means is that they find out if somebody gets COVID, they find out who they were close to in the past, and they tell that person, stay home, don't risk infecting anyone else. Okay.
That's what happens. And then, like, if you run into somebody, then the government has a small stipend, so you don't lose your money from working or whatever you'd be doing. You just get paid to stay home for 2 weeks.
We're going to talk about that in just a second. So, what do you think the government is doing well in Taiwan that's helping to keep people safe from the coronavirus?
So, I may be a doctor, but I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not really. I think they're doing pretty much everything well. Like, my one thing is testing is still a little bit on the low end here, and they've kind of refused to do any large scale testing, which I don't get. But again, they're the experts. I'm not the expert. And so far, they've done a very good job. So I really don't have any other critiques. It seems like they've done great. My life is largely unaffected here. It's just, I have to make sure I have a mask in my pocket when I leave the house, and that's about it.
Okay, but you're not worried about getting the coronavirus, and your friends aren't worried about getting the coronavirus?
No. I mean, whenever there's been sort of these scares of like local cases, we know where that person was in the past few days, and that gets posted online. Even though there's very few cases, generally the government or the Central Epidemic Command Center, who's in charge of our response here, has a meeting every afternoon, and so then they announce all the latest news and take questions from reporters, and that happens almost every day, sometimes twice or 3 times in a day if they have more important news that comes out during the day. But,
wow.
Yeah, no one. People are scared, but generally at this point, I think people are more annoyed that they can't go anywhere outside of Taiwan.
But they can travel wherever they want to in Taiwan pretty safely.
Yeah, in Taiwan. Okay, so here's a concrete example of how coronavirus affected my life. Is we just had Chinese New Year here, so it was a long vacation, sort of like Christmas. And I went to the south of the island, and I wanted to take the high-speed train back, but because of coronavirus, they only had tickets for specific seats, whereas in the past, you could just take a standing ticket and stand on the train for, 45 minutes. So I wasn't able to do that, and I had to take a bus. The bus took 6 hours. But that was sort of the extent of how coronavirus has affected my life personally.
So it sounds like it's a little bit annoying sometimes, but mostly people aren't very worried about getting it.
It's annoying, but people are, much happier to be slightly annoyed once every few weeks as opposed to, dying, worrying about that.
Is there anything else important that you think that some 7 and 8-year-olds in Oakland should know about COVID-19 and the coronavirus in Taiwan?
I think what they should know is that there are a lot of places who reacted to this news differently than we did in the US. And they've done so very successfully, not just Taiwan, but also you found New Zealand did a great job. And those, you might think, oh, those are small islands, but then you look at Vietnam, which is right next to China, they've also done a great job. So, sort of, it's this idea of everyone has to have a responsibility. So, you isolate yourself if you think you may have been exposed to the coronavirus. And then, just in your day to day life, wash your hands a little bit more often than you're used to. If you cough, don't cough on people. If you need to sneeze, sneeze into your shoulder. Sort of basic hygiene. Be good to
Okay.
yourself.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like in Taiwan, it sounds like it wasn't just the people, it was also the government doing things
The government
to
did a
help
great
people.
job. Yeah. So that, hats off to them. I think they've had a few trial runs
Mm,
recently, and they had everything ready, especially after SARS, sort of a very big deal. And I guess SARS for most places was not as big of a deal as the coronavirus, but in Taiwan it was a much bigger deal. So over the course of the epidemic right now, there's nine people have died in all of Taiwan, and Taiwan is a country of 23 million people, so not a lot.
wow.
And
That's
total infections are still under 1,000, and that's including imported cases. So like local cases are under 100, total cases under 1,000.
all right. I guess we can hope that the United States learns some lessons like Taiwan already did.
Yeah, it's a question of leadership, and maybe there were people in place. Who knows?
All right. Well, thank you, Dean from Taiwan. Thank you, brother.
All right.
That's the end of our interview for today.